Homeopathy may be the most controversial but also the most popular alternative medicine. While some argue against it, others swear by its great power and effectiveness. How does homeopathy work? How did it become what it is today, and what can modern medicine learn from it? The first principle of homeopathy is like cures like. Remedies use ingredients that cause the symptoms you want to cure. In practice, that means that remedies against fever could, for example, be made from belladonna, which also causes fever. A mixture based from bee venom is used to treat itchy swellings, and so on. The second principle is a special method of preparation called potentization. The idea is that diluting and agitating the ingredients activates their curative powers and enhances their effect. To do this, the ingredient is dissolved in alcohol or distilled water. Homeopaths take 1 part of the solution and mix it with 9 parts of water, diluting it down to 1/10 of its original concentration and shaking it. What you have now is a 1x potency, 1 part ingredient and 9 parts solvent, named after the Roman numeral X for 10. Now this process is repeated. Take 1 part, mix it with 9 parts of pure water and shake it vigorously. Now you have 2x. You do this again and again until you reach the desired grade of potency. The finished remedy is then taken orally, or sometimes it's applied as little sugar pellets that are sold as globuli. A 20x potency, for example, is like dissolving 1 aspirin pill in the water volume of the whole Atlantic. But many are much more extreme, like 30C, for example. C means that the mixture has 1 part ingredient and 99 parts water. So the commonly sold 30C mixture means 1 part ingredient and 1 million billion parts of water. If we wanted a globuli pill with a single atom of the original ingredient, then our pill would be the diameter of the distance between the Earth and the Sun. 150 million kilometers. A pill so massive that it would collapse into a black hole under its own mass. Because of this, potentization is one of the biggest criticisms of homeopathy. The extreme dilution is supposed to make the ingredients more potent, but on a physical level, this doesn't really make sense. Most homeopathic remedies are diluted so much that not a single atom of the active ingredient is left in them. The explanation of why the mixtures still work is that shaking the mixture after every dilution leaves behind a spirit-like essence of the ingredient. Basically, the idea is that water remembers what was put into it. But if this were true, then every substance that ever met a drop of water would leave an essence behind and lead to unpredictable effects when it was accidentally ingested. Think of all the stuff that lives and floats in the oceans. Every sip of water would be a supercharged homeopathic cocktail. So how did homeopathy become the most successful alternative medicine? In the 18th century, medicine was very different from today. Treatments like bloodletting left the patient worse off than before. So German physician Samuel Hahnemann wanted a non-invasive, natural way of healing and developed homeopathy. And in fact, homeopathic hospitals were soon successful because doing no harm beats doing harm. Hahnemann imposed very strict rules on his patients. First, you had to avoid coffee, tea, alcohol, spicy food, sweet food. No old cheese, no onions, no meat. No clothes made from sheep's wool, but also no sedentary work, no sitting inside in stuffy air, no warm rooms, no riding horses, no napping, no playing games, no masturbation, and of course no reading pornographic texts, and many more. Then, and only then, would his remedies work according to the inventor of homeopathy. Of course, all of these instructions are ignored and not talked about today. Medicine has changed a lot in the last 150 years. Never before in human history have we enjoyed a comparable level of health. Never have we lived as long. And this is largely due to the new tools we've developed. Modern diagnostics, double-blinded studies and scientific evaluation to check and prove which stuff works. Thanks to these tools, after countless studies and reviews, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that homeopathy does not have any effect beyond placebo. But even so, who cares why it works if it helps people? Maybe you tried it and felt better. Or you know someone that got over a horrible disease while using homeopathic remedies. And there are plenty of reports of it working for children and animals. What do we make of these experiences? The placebo effect is very real and not imaginary. No matter how smart you are, you're not immune to it. If people believe that something will help them feel better, their trust alone has the desired effect. And it's been proven that the placebo effect can be transferred. Children and animals rely on their parents or keepers and are in tune to their emotions. If a parent has a lot of trust in a treatment and eases up, this can help a child relax and help relieve symptoms. This can also be observed with animals who react strongly to the body language cues of the people caring for them. But the most powerful tool of homeopathy is time. Our bodies are survival machines. Infections pass on their own after a few days. But if you take some remedy when you already feel sick and then start getting better, it feels like it did indeed cure you, well actually it would have happened anyway. The homeopathy industry likes to play the gentle alternative to Big Pharma. But the homeopathic industry is Big Pharma. Billions of dollars are made with extreme profit margins. The homeopathy industry has its own lobby organizations and fights its enemies as hard as it can. A lot of money is on the line. Globally, the market is expected to reach over $17 billion by 2024. Some critics even argue that the homeopathic industry is bad for public health because it creates distrust in proven medicine. The belief in homeopathy correlates with skepticism about vaccinations. This can discourage people to seek the help they need when their lives or the lives of their children are on the line. But there is actually a key to the success of homeopathy that we could and should copy. The first consultation with a homeopath can take hours and is very personal. For a patient who's already been on a pilgrimage from doctor to doctor, this level of attention and empathy can make a huge difference to their well-being, even if the conversation was not the point of the therapy. Modern medicine is efficient. It saves millions of lives each year. But it's also a strictly organized system. Tight budgets force doctors and nurses to deal with lots of patients. Consultations need to be time efficient, diagnoses made quickly, treatments fast, which can leave patients feeling invisible, scared, and left behind. This is what modern medicine can learn from homeopathy. It meets a human need that has been left unfulfilled. We need to make time for the individual again, see people, not numbers. But as important as empathy is, it's not a substitute for actual treatment. Faith can move mountains, but sugar water can't cure cancer. After a short break of a few years, Kurzgesagt is back in German. Thanks to the support of Funk, we have relaunched the German channel and are beginning to upload a video every 1 to 2 weeks. Besides redoing our favorite videos, there'll be a number of videos that will not exist in English for a while. Check out the channel here, tell us what you think, and subscribe and watch a few. If the channel goes well, the German videos might become a regular thing for years, and we might even do more languages. The fundamental currency of our universe is energy. It lights our homes, grows our food, powers our computers. We can get it lots of ways: burning fossil fuels, splitting atoms, or sunlight striking photovoltaics. But there's a downside to everything. Fossil fuels are extremely toxic, nuclear waste is, well, nuclear waste, and there are not enough batteries to store sunlight for cloudy days yet. And yet, the sun seems to have virtually limitless free energy. Is there a way we could build a sun on Earth? Can we bottle a star? The sun shines because of nuclear fusion. In a nutshell, fusion is a thermonuclear process, meaning that the ingredients have to be incredibly hot, so hot that the atoms are stripped of their electrons, making a plasma where nuclei and electrons bounce around freely. Since nuclei are all positively charged, they repel each other. In order to overcome this repulsion, the particles have to be going very, very fast. In this context, very fast means very hot. Millions of degrees. Stars cheat to reach these temperatures. They are so massive that the pressure in their cores generates the heat to squeeze the nuclei together until they merge and fuse, creating heavier nuclei and releasing energy in the process. It is this energy release that scientists hope to harness in a new generation of power plant, the fusion reactor. On Earth, it's not feasible to use this brute force method to create fusion, So if we wanted to build a reactor that generates energy from fusion, we have to get clever. To date, scientists have invented two ways of making plasmas hot enough to fuse. The first type of reactor uses a magnetic field to squeeze a plasma in a donut-shaped chamber where the reactions take place. These magnetic confinement reactors, such as the ITER reactor in France, use superconducting electromagnets cooled with liquid helium to within a few degrees of absolute zero, meaning they host some of the biggest temperature gradients in the known universe. The second type, called inertial confinement, uses pulses from superpowered lasers to heat the surface of a pellet of fuel, imploding it, briefly making the fuel hot and dense enough to fuse. In fact, one of the most powerful lasers in the world is used for fusion experiments at the National Ignition Facility in the US. These experiments and others like them around the world are today just experiments. Scientists are still developing the technology. And although they can achieve fusion, right now it costs more energy to do the experiments than they produce in fusion. The technology has a long way to go before it's commercially viable. And maybe it never will be. It might just be impossible to make a viable fusion reactor on Earth. But if it gets there, it will be so efficient that a single glass of seawater could be used to produce as much energy as burning a barrel of oil with no waste to speak of. This is because fusion reactors would use hydrogen or helium as fuel, and seawater is loaded with hydrogen. But not just any hydrogen will do. Specific isotopes with extra neutrons, called deuterium and tritium, are needed to make the right reactions. Deuterium is stable and can be found in abundance in seawater, though tritium is a bit trickier. It's radioactive, and there may only be 20 kilograms of it in the world, mostly in nuclear warheads, which makes it incredibly expensive. So we may need another fusion buddy for deuterium instead of tritium. Helium-3, an isotope of helium, might be a great substitute. Unfortunately, it's also incredibly rare on Earth. But here, the Moon might have the answer. Over billions of years, the solar wind may have built up huge deposits of helium-3 on the Moon. Instead of making helium-3, we can mine it. If we could sift the lunar dust for helium, we'd have enough fuel to power the entire world for thousands of years. One more argument for establishing a moon base if you weren't convinced already. Okay, maybe you think building a mini-sun still sounds kind of dangerous. But they'd actually be much safer than most other types of power plant. A fusion reactor is not like a nuclear plant, which can melt down catastrophically. If the confinement failed, then the plasma would expand and cool, and the reaction would stop. Put simply, it's not a bomb. The release of radioactive fuel like tritium could pose a threat to the environment. Tritium could bond with oxygen, making radioactive water, which could be dangerous as it seeps into the environment. Fortunately, there's no more than a few grams of tritium in use at a given time, so a leak would be quickly diluted. So we've just told you that there's nearly unlimited energy to be had at no expense to the environment in something as simple as water. So, what's the catch? Cost. We simply don't know if fusion power will ever be commercially viable. Even if they work, they might be too expensive to ever build. The main drawback is that it's unproven technology. It's a $10 billion gamble, and that money might be better spent on other clean energy that's already proven itself. Maybe we should cut our losses. Or maybe, when the payoff is unlimited clean energy for everyone, it might be worth the risk. You're not a person. You're a planet made of roughly 40 trillion cells. There is so much of you that if your cells were human-sized, you'd be as big as 20 Mount Everests. For your creepy-crawly inhabitants, this makes your body an ecosystem, rich in resources and warmth and space. A perfect place to move into and have a family. While some of these guests are welcome, most are not. Your immune system is the guardian of this planet, the force tasked with protecting yourself against the constant danger of invasion. Unfortunately, your enemies in the tiny world have a huge advantage. Consider the effort it takes to make a single copy of yourself and your trillions of cells. First, you need to find someone who thinks you're cute, date and be awkward, and if things work out in a complicated dance, two of your cells merge together. Then you need to wait for months while the cell multiplies over and over until it's released into the world as a human being. And even then, you only have a mini copy that needs years to become remotely useful. A bacterium consists of one cell. It can make a fully grown copy in about half an hour. A virus can turn into hundreds within hours and billions within days. Your enemies multiply orders of magnitude faster than you. Even worse, for a bacterium or virus, your body is a hostile ecosystem applying selective pressure. Because they go through so many generations so quickly, eventually, by pure chance, there will be an individual that mutates and adapts in just the right way to resist your defenses and then multiply quickly again. In other words, you're facing a sheer endless variety of different enemies, and you're too slow to keep up with their evolution. This is bad. Luckily, your immune system is just about the most amazing thing ever. The second most complex biological system known to us after the human brain, and so sophisticated that we still haven't discovered all its secrets. Since it's so complicated, we have to simplify and focus on one thing at a time. If you want the full story, wait for the announcement at the end of the video. Okay, so why are we not all killed by some new bacteria or virus? In a nutshell, you actually have two immune systems, the innate and the adaptive immune system. The innate immune system was ready when you were born. It mostly consists of general-purpose soldiers. We introduced them in the last immune video. The adaptive immune system carries two types of cells, T cells and B cells, that are your superweapons and are incredibly effective and deadly for your enemies. These cells are complicated to produce and take a lot of time to deploy, but once they're ready, they pack a real punch. What makes your adaptive immune system so powerful is that it has the largest library in the universe. It has an answer to everything. You have at least one of these superweapon cells inside you to fight the Black Death, the coronavirus, and the first deadly bacteria that will emerge in a city on Mars in 100 years. This makes it possible for you to counter the ability of bacteria and viruses to change so rapidly. How is this possible? To understand what's going on here, we need to take one step back. All organisms on Earth are made from the same basic parts, mostly proteins. Proteins are the building blocks of life and can have billions of different shapes. You can imagine them as 3D puzzle pieces. There are billions of different puzzle pieces your enemies can use to construct their bodies. Why is this important? Because proteins are, in a way, the language of the micro-world. Cells don't have eyes or ears, so to tell friend from foe, they have to touch them and recognize if their protein is part of a friend or part of an enemy. Recognizing means that cells have countless tiny devices called receptors that are able to connect with a specific protein puzzle piece. So your cells have tiny puzzle pieces on their outsides that are able to click together or recognize other protein puzzle pieces. When a cell connects together with a protein and recognizes it as enemy, it knows that it has to attack. Only if your cells can make this distinction between friend or foe is your immune system able to fight an invader. But since there are billions of possible protein puzzle pieces, this means there are billions of possible enemy puzzle pieces. This is also one of the reasons we still have to deal with diseases like the flu each year. The influenza virus mutates very rapidly, and so the proteins that make up its hull constantly change a tiny bit. The soldiers of your innate immune system have a large number of the puzzle pieces for common bacteria and viruses memorized. That's why they are your all-purpose weapons. But they are ineffective against many billions of mutations and adaptations that your enemies can develop. So the reason you are still alive is that your adaptive immune system is able to recognize between 1 billion and 10 billion different enemy protein puzzle pieces, which is enough to be prepared for every possible enemy. But how is this possible? How could your immune system possibly have this much of a variety to be prepared for every possible protein puzzle piece? Well, the cells of your adaptive immune system found a cheat code. mixing and matching their own genetic code to create this stunning variety of receptors. The details are way too complicated for this video, but in a nutshell, your adaptive immune cells have official permission to take a tiny part of their own genetic code and mix it in random ways to create billions of different receptors. A good way to explain this is by asking you to imagine an army of cooks, with each of them wanting their own special recipe. They have 100 different ingredients to choose from. Each ingredient stands for one tiny piece of genetic code in this metaphor. So each cook takes a few random ingredients and randomly mixes them together. Maybe tomato, chicken, rice and half an onion as entree, marshmallow, pepper, strawberries and a quarter banana as a dessert. Or cucumber, beef, potatoes and 2 carrots, and blueberries, chocolate and cream with a pinch of cinnamon. Even with slight variation and with only 100 ingredients, there are billions of possible recipes. And likewise, with just a small selection of gene fragments, your cells create billions of receptors. The details of this are so cool that they should get their own video, or their own chapter in a book. In any case, by mixing up gene fragments, you get up to 10 billion different combinations. So in the end, you get billions of immune cells, and each of them has one specific and unique receptor, the dish from our metaphor, that is able to recognize one specific protein puzzle piece. In total, you end up with at least one cell for every enemy that could possibly exist. But here we run into a pretty dangerous problem. If your adaptive immune system is making weapons that can attack every possible protein puzzle piece in the universe, wouldn't it also make some that can attack your own cells? Yes, it happens all the time. This is so fundamentally dangerous to your survival that you have a whole organ that does nothing but work on preventing this. The murder university of your thymus. Your thymus is a chicken wing-sized organ above your heart, and you've probably never heard of it. Interestingly, your thymus is one of the reasons why your immune system weakens as you age, because it's in a constant state of decline once you reach puberty. But what does the thymus do? In your murder university, your immune system is putting your adaptive immune cells through an intense and deadly curriculum. Basically, it's showing them all sorts of protein puzzle pieces that are used by your own cells to see how they react. When a young cell recognizes a body puzzle piece and wants to attack it, the teacher's cells order them to kill themselves, and they are eaten up and recycled. The immune system is so particular about this process that around 98% of your adaptive immune cells that enter Murder University die there. 2% graduate and get to do their job of protecting you for real. If this process goes wrong and cells escape that can recognize your own protein puzzle pieces, this can lead to autoimmune disease, where your immune system attacks your own body from the inside. And this, again, is another story for another time. Okay. Let's summarize. Your immune system has 2 parts, one that defends you right after birth and one that carries the largest library of superweapons in the universe but needs to boot up first. To create billions of different superweapons, your adaptive immune cells recombine a part of their genetic code to create a breathtaking variety of attack weapons. Then they enter a murder university that only 2% survive to make sure they don't attack you. And then you end up with billions of different cells that in total are able to protect you against every possible enemy in the universe. Now, wait a second. If this is all true, why do we get sick at all? Why was a new disease like COVID-19 able to kill millions of people? Well, everything we've just learned about is a tiny, tiny window into the amazing struggle for life and death that plays out every day inside your body. And there are so many amazing details and questions here. How does your body actually find the right cell in time to protect you? How do your enemies fight back and overcome your immune system anyway? And what about all the things that didn't fit in this video? The desire to be free from the limits of the human experience is as old as our first stories. We exist in an endless universe, only bound by the laws of physics, and yet our consciousness is trapped in mortal machines made of meat. With the breathtaking explosion of innovation and progress, for the first time, the concept of leaving our flesh piles behind and uploading our minds into a digital utopia seems possible. even like the logical next step on our evolutionary ladder. Upload what exactly? Mind is one of those words that are really hard to define. It's thought to be the collective abilities of your consciousness and intelligence, the thing that lets you imagine, recognize, and dream. Mind uploading is the hypothetical concept of making a copy of this inner world and transferring it into a computer to run a simulation of your consciousness. But even defining the premise gets really hard, really fast. The possibility of mind uploading is based on 3 assumptions. Assumption 1. Your mind is in your brain's structure, arrangement, and biochemistry. The idea that everything about the mind can be found in the brain is called physicalism, and it keeps our discussion within the domain of natural law. Assumption 2. At some point, we will understand the brain well enough and possess the technology to simulate all of its aspects to make a digital mind copy. Assumption 3. Computer software can host your mind, which means the mind is computable. There is no physical property in the brain, including consciousness, that cannot be simulated accurately, even if it requires a lot of code. All of these assumptions have been proposed and challenged by scientists and philosophers, and they remain the subject of passionate debate. With so many fundamental questions still unanswered, it's hard to discuss the topic without annoying someone. Whatever your position, every discussion of mind upload has to begin with the brain. The brain in a nutshell. The brain is the most complex biological structure known and deserves its own entire video, so let's just take a brief look at it. Around 100 billion neurons are communicating via 1 million billion connections that are sending signals up to 1,000 times each second, which is 1 quadrillion events every second of your waking life. And it's not just neurons, there are billions of supporting and immune cells of various types performing different jobs. On a macro level, the brain can be divided into sections with different roles, from breathing and heart rate to coordinating movement and involuntary reflexes. The most developed parts, the neocortex, or the outermost layer of the brain, hold memories, our ability to plan, think and imagine, hope and dream. Where exactly the you part of the brain is situated is not entirely clear. We know that areas like the precuneus cortex have the greatest influence on our consciousness, but also that several areas can network together to share tasks none of them can do alone. The brain's building blocks are not exactly simple either. Neurons are not just wires, they alter and process information. Synapses, where signals are handed over from one neuron to the next, contain receptors for hundreds of chemical signals, opening them up to outside influence. We have a basic understanding of how these work, and we can accurately predict their behavior at small scales, but there's a lot more to the brain than just nerve signals. Hormones play a huge role, like serotonin, which affects our mood, or histamine, which helps us learn. The brain is influenced by our other parts too, from heart nerves to gut bacteria. What seemed like a very complicated system to begin with gets even more complicated the more we learn about it. To get this wildly interconnected mess of cells and meat and chemicals into a computer, we need a model that we can simulate in our digital world. Some sort of scan. Unfortunately, our scanning technology, like fMRI machines, is not nearly good enough to attempt such a thing. But there is a different method that seems very promising. Cutting a brain into tiny slices and scanning them with a high-resolution electron microscope to create an accurate map of all the cells and connections. In 2019, scientists successfully mapped a cubic millimeter of mouse brain, roughly the size of a big grain of sand. It contained 100,000 neurons with 1 billion synapses and 4 kilometers of nerve fibers. This grain of brain was cut into 25,000 slices. 5 electron microscopes ran continuously for 5 months, collecting more than 100 million images. It took 3 months to assemble the images into a 3D model. The completed dataset fills up 2 million gigabytes of cloud storage. To scan a whole human brain, we would have to repeat this effort 1 million times, which is much easier said than done. Even worse, To correctly simulate a brain, we might even have to map out much smaller building blocks to include the billions of underlying proteins or even individual molecules that cause all the behaviors we see at the cellular level, which might produce more data than the capacity of all data storage on Earth. Brain water to consciousness wine. While all of these issues are annoying, the real question is how we turn the static blueprint of the brain into an active thing. Even if we have a scan, down to the level of synapses, we need laws and rules that animate the wiring diagram to endow this static structure with life, update it with the various laws of chemical binding, of electrodynamics to animate the simulation. So it becomes a dynamic active thing like a brain that exists from one microsecond to the next, that can evolve in time, think, see, and act. The reality is that we just don't know if this is possible to achieve. If our technology can give rise to real minds. It all hinges on the nature of the problem. Are the brain and mind just complicated and a lot of work to figure out, or are they complex in a way that we can't solve? In the worst case, consciousness is more than the sum of the parts of the brain in a way that we don't realize yet. Complex in a way that we can't solve by getting better scans. Just having a list of the ingredients might not be enough to get a good consciousness cake. Right now, we have a great starting point with tangible scientific results and an end goal, but the road to true simulation is unclear and requires a lot of innovation and research. Humans have historically been horrible at predicting the pace of progress. In the best case, it's just a matter of doing the work and finding the right solutions. It might not be necessary to simulate every last cell down to the last atom. Instead, it may be possible to simplify elements into probabilistic models that could match the behavior of the brain using a more manageable number of simpler systems. So we really don't know if we will ever understand our brain and consciousness well enough to upload human minds. But the science is real and worth pursuing. At the very least, we will just learn a lot about ourselves and develop a bunch of new technologies. If we succeed, this might put mind uploading well within the capabilities of our rapidly progressing computer technology. The consequences for humanity and our future in this universe are vast, creepy, and amazing. The copy. Successful mind uploading is functional immortality. Unless damaged or deleted, you will continue to exist as long as a copy is stored somewhere. Of course, if the scan is corrupted in any of a myriad of ways, your mind might get corrupted too. You might be in an eternity of pain or paranoia or having an endless psychotic breakdown. The question if this digital mind is you opens another whole can of worms. For now, we'll just assume that your digital mind at least feels like it's you. How would mind uploading change your outlook on life? Will you feel safer knowing that death is not necessarily the end? Or would you try to be super safe to avoid dying before your mind is uploaded? If scanning technology does become advanced enough, your biological and digital versions could coexist. You could help each other out by making your biological lifespan more enjoyable and the future of the copy more secure. Whatever happens, your mind copy will begin a completely new life once it opens their digital eyes for the first time. Having a functional body is actually quite nice, and you're pretty used to it. Food, love, pain and exhaustion, all of these things are parts of us that we must live with. But in the end, they are the result of neurons firing in your brain. So while you could decide to live in a simulated body, it might be optional for a digital mind. Falling in love might lose meaning if you can have it at the press of a button. Instead, you might end up searching for new, extraordinary experiences. Walk on the surface of the sun. Speed up time to skip past a few boring months. Experience a simulation of the past. Your perspectives and priorities will change as you continue to exist in this liberated form. The longer digital minds exist, eventually they will likely gain greater knowledge of themselves and an ability to change their own contents. This can be as simple as deleting a memory that bugs you. You might change aspects of your personality, like grudges, addictions, or laziness. Without the constraints of biology, your abilities might move up as technology progresses, while your priorities or goals might become more and more foreign to your original brain if it's still alive. Waking up to the true potential of digital immortality will be gradual. You can start projects that would take more than a lifetime to complete. Scientists could accumulate an incredible amount of knowledge, leading to discoveries that could revolutionize the world. Adventurers could upload themselves onto small spaceships and embark on journeys to the stars, just putting themselves on pause for thousands of years at a time. Although it's unlikely that every digital mind will work for the benefit of humanity, since our current meat versions don't do that either. Some will seek power and influence and will have a literal eternity of trying to create empires. Others will begin hoarding as many resources for themselves as possible as they compete with other minds trying to do the same. The longer they live, the less sympathy they may feel for simple meat beings. Or imagine immortal cult leaders who propagate lies and invent religions, fine-tuning and perfecting their dogma over hundreds of years. Or perhaps none of all that. Maybe our minds are not made for immortality, and digital minds will just become rigid and unproductive and retire after a very long life, having experienced everything they could ever want to. It's hard to predict how much good or bad a self-improving mind could do with hundreds or thousands of years of free time. And now, we'd like to tell you a story about a Kurzgesagt video that took us over 1,000 hours to create. It all started with a simple idea. We stumbled upon something truly awe-inspiring, a piece of knowledge so important we wanted to share it with as many people as possible. So we got to work. It took many days and nights, but finally we managed to craft a perfect script. Then the illustration and animation burbs took over and the visual magic began. And at last, after over 1,000 hours of hard work, this video was ready to be released to the world, bringing joy and inspiration to so many people. So what was this very special video that took so much time, so much love, and so much effort to create? In reality, every single video we create takes this much effort. It might seem excessive for a YouTube video, but for us, it's the only way. Making each video to the best of our abilities, be it in research, writing, or visuals. Always challenging ourselves. No compromises. But there's one special group of people that make this exciting endeavor possible: our patrons. They are by our side during every part of the process, lifting us up and supporting us. Spending this much time on a single video is a really bad business decision, but our patrons make it possible. They are a vital part of the Kurzgesagt team. If you would also like to be part of our team and help us create inspiring stories, support us on Patreon. This way, you're supporting and contributing to our mission of making science and humanism appealing to as many people as possible, while getting some exciting exclusive perks and insights in return, like a sneak peek into our next video, monthly behind-the-scenes updates on what's happening in the treehouse and what we're working on, as well as exclusive wallpapers, or even your own unique Kurzgesagt burb created especially for you by one of our illustrators. Become a patron. Become a part of Kurzgesagt. How long do you think it will take before machines do your job better than you do? Automation used to mean big, stupid machines doing repetitive work in factories. Today, they can land aircraft, diagnose cancer, and trade stocks. We are entering a new age of automation unlike anything that's come before. According to a 2013 study, almost half of all jobs in the US could potentially be automated in the next 2 decades. But wait, hasn't automation been around for decades? What's different this time? Things used to be simple. Innovation made human work easier and productivity rose, which means that more stuff or services could be produced per hour using the same amount of human workers. This eliminated many jobs, but also created other jobs that were better, which was important because the growing population needed work. So, in a nutshell, innovation, higher productivity, fewer old jobs, and many new and often better jobs. Overall, this worked well for a majority of people and living standards improved. There's a clear progression in terms of what humans did for a living. For the longest time, we worked in agriculture. With the Industrial Revolution, this shifted to production jobs. And as automation became more widespread, humans shifted into service jobs. And then, only a few moments ago in human history, the information age happened. Suddenly, the rules were different. Our jobs are now being taken over by machines much faster than they were in the past. That's worrying, of course, but innovation will clearly save us, right? While new information age industries are booming, they are creating fewer and fewer new jobs. In 1979, General Motors employed more than 800,000 workers and made about $11 billion. In 2012, Google made about $14 billion while employing 58,000 people. You may not like this comparison, but Google is an example of what created new jobs in the past. Innovative new industries. Old innovative industries are running out of steam. Just look at cars. When they became a thing 100 years ago, they created huge industries. Cars transformed our way of life, our infrastructure, and our cities. Millions of people found jobs either directly or indirectly. Decades of investment kept this momentum going. Today, this process is largely complete. Innovation in the car industry does not create as many jobs as it used to. While electric cars are great and all, they won't create millions of new jobs. But wait, what about the internet? Some technologists argue that the internet is an innovation on a par with the introduction of electricity. If we go with this comparison, we see how our modern innovation differs from the old one. The internet created new industries, but they're not creating enough jobs to keep up with population growth or to compensate for the industries the internet is killing. At its peak in 2004, Blockbuster had 84,000 employees and made $6 billion in revenue. In 2016, Netflix had 4,500 employees and made $9 billion in revenue. Or take us, for example. With a full-time team of just 12 people, Kurzgesagt reaches millions of people. A TV station with the same amount of viewers needs way more employees. Innovation in the information age doesn't equate to the creation of enough new jobs, which would be bad enough on its own, but now a new wave of automation and a new generation of machines is slowly taking over. To understand this, we need to understand ourselves first. Human progress is based on the division of labor. As we advanced over thousands of years, our jobs became more and more specialized. While even our smartest machines are bad at doing complicated jobs, they are extremely good at doing narrowly defined and predictable tasks. This is what destroyed factory jobs. But look at a complex job long and hard enough, and you'll find that it's really just many narrowly defined and predictable tasks, one after another. Machines are on the brink of becoming so good at breaking down complex jobs into many predictable ones that for a lot of people, there will be no further room to specialize. We are on the verge of being out-competed. Digital machines do this via machine learning, which enables them to acquire information and skills by analyzing data. This makes them become better at something through the relationships they discover. Machines teach themselves. We make this possible by giving a computer a lot of data about the thing we want it to become better at. Show a machine all the things you bought online, and it will slowly learn what to recommend to you, so you buy more things. Machine learning is now meeting more of its potential because in recent years, humans have started to gather data about everything. Behavior, weather patterns, medical records, communication systems, travel data, and of course, data about what we do at work. What we've created by accident is a huge library machines can use to learn how humans do things and learn to do them better. These digital machines might be the biggest job killer of all. They can be replicated instantly and for free. When they improve, you don't need to invest in big metal things, you can just use the new code. And they have the ability to get better fast. How fast? If your work involves complex work on a computer today, you might be out of work even sooner than the people who still have jobs in factories. There are actual real-world examples of how this transition might be happening. A San Francisco company offers a project management software for big corporations which is supposed to eliminate middle management positions. When it's hired for a new project, the software first decides which jobs can be automated and precisely where it needs actual professional humans. It then helps assemble a team of freelancers over the internet. The software then distributes tasks to the humans and controls the quality of the work, tracking individual performance until the project is complete. Okay, this doesn't sound too bad. While this machine is killing one job, it creates jobs for freelancers, right? Well, as the freelancers complete their tasks, learning algorithms track them and gather data about their work and which tasks it consists of. So what's actually happening is that the freelancers are teaching a machine how to replace them. On average, this software reduces costs by about 50% in the first year and by another 25% in the second year. This is only one example of many. There are machines and programs getting as good or better than humans in all kinds of fields, from pharmacists to analysts, journalists to radiologists, cashiers, bank tellers, or the unskilled worker flipping burgers. All of these jobs won't disappear overnight, but fewer and fewer humans will be doing them. We'll discuss a few cases in a follow-up video. But while jobs disappearing is bad, it's only half of the story. It's not enough to substitute old jobs with new ones. We need to be generating new jobs constantly because the world population is growing. In the past, we have solved this through innovation. But since 1973, the generation of new jobs in the US has begun to shrink. And the first decade of the 21st century was the first one where the total amount of jobs in the US did not grow for the first time. In a country that needs to create up to 150,000 new jobs per month just to keep up with population growth, this is bad news. This is also starting to affect standards of living. In the past, it was seen as obvious that with rising productivity, more and better jobs would be created. But the numbers tell a different story. In 1998, US workers worked a total of 194 billion hours. Over the course of the next 15 years, their output increased by 42%. But in 2013, the amount of hours worked by US workers was still 194 billion hours. What this means is that despite productivity growing drastically, thousands of new businesses opening up, and the US population growing by over 40 million, there was no growth at all in the number of hours worked in 15 years. At the same time, wages for new university graduates in the US have been declining for the past decade, while up to 40% of new graduates are forced to take on jobs that don't require a degree. Productivity is separating from human labor. The nature of innovation in the information age is different from everything we encountered before. This process started years ago and is already well underway, even without new disruptions like self-driving cars or robot accountants. It looks like automation is different this time. This time, the machines might really take our jobs. Our economies are based on the premise that people consume. But if fewer and fewer people have decent work, who will be doing all the consuming? Are we producing ever more cheaply only to arrive at a point where too few people can actually buy all our stuff and services? Or will the future see a tiny minority of the super rich who own the machines dominating the rest of us? And does our future really have to be that grim? While we were fairly dark in this video, it's far from certain that things will turn out negatively. The information age and modern automation could be a huge opportunity to change human society and reduce poverty and inequality drastically. It could be a seminal moment in human history. We'll talk about this potential and possible solutions like a universal basic income in part 2 of this video series. We need to think big and fast, because one thing's for sure, the machines are not coming, they are already here. Every second of your life, you are under attack. Billions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi are trying to make you their home. So our bodies have developed a super complex little army with guards, soldiers, intelligence, weapons factories, and communicators to protect you from, dying. For this video, let's assume the immune system has 12 different jobs, for example, kill enemies, communicate, etc. And it has 21 different cells and 2 protein forces. These cells have up to 4 different jobs. Let's assign them. Here are the interactions. Now, let's make this understandable. First of all, let's add colors to the jobs. Now, let's illustrate the cells. The central color represents the main job of the cell, while the surrounding ones represent secondary duties. Now the immune system looks like this. Now the interactions. Isn't this complexity just awesome? For this video, we will only talk about these cells and ignore the rest. So what happens in the case of an infection? It's a beautiful day when suddenly a wild rusty nail appears and you cut yourself. The first barrier of the immune system is breached, your skin. Nearby bacteria seize on the opportunity and enter your wound. They start using up the body's resources and double their numbers about every 20 minutes. At first, they fly under the radar, but when a certain bacteria population is reached, they change their behavior and start to damage the body by changing the environment around them. The immune system has to stop them as fast as possible. First of all, your guard cells, known as macrophages, intervene. They are huge cells that guard every border region of the body. Most of the time, they alone can suffocate an attack because they can devour up to 100 intruders each. They swallow the intruder whole and trap it inside a membrane. Then the enemy gets broken down by enzymes and is killed. On top of that, they cause inflammation by ordering the blood vessels to release water into the battlefield so fighting becomes easier. You notice this as a very mild swelling. When the macrophages fight for too long, they call in heavy backup by releasing messenger proteins that communicate location and urgency. Neutrophils leave their patrol routes in the blood and move to the battlefield. The neutrophils fight so furiously that they kill healthy cells in the process. On top of that, they generate barriers that trap and kill the bacteria. They are indeed so deadly that they evolved to commit suicide after 5 days to prevent them from causing too much damage. If this is not enough to stop the invasion, the brain of the immune system kicks in. The dendritic cell gets active. It reacts to the signals of the soldiers and starts collecting samples from the enemies. They rip them into pieces and present the parts on their outer layer. Now, the dendritic cell makes a crucial decision. Should they call for antivirus forces that eradicate infected body cells or an army of bacteria killers? In this case, antibacteria forces are necessary. It then travels to the closest lymph node in about a day. Here, billions of helper and killer T cells are waiting to be activated. When T cells are born, they go through a difficult and complicated training process, and only a quarter survives. The surviving cells are equipped with a specific setup. And the dendritic cell is on its way looking for a helper T cell with a setup that's just right. It's looking for a helper T cell that can bind to the parts of the intruders which the dendritic cell has presented on its membrane. When it finally finds one, a chain reaction takes place. The helper T cell is activated. It quickly duplicates thousands of times. Some become memory T cells that stay in the lymph node and will make you practically immune against this enemy. Some travel to the field of battle to help out. And the third group goes on to travel to the center of the lymph node to activate a very powerful weapons factory. Like the T cells, they're born with a specific setup. And when a B cell and a T cell with the same setup meet, hell breaks loose. The B cell duplicates rapidly and starts producing millions of little weapons. They work so hard that they would literally die from exhaustion very fast. Here, helper T cells play another important role. They stimulate the hard-working factories and tell them, "Don't die yet, we still need you. Keep going." This also ensures that the factories die if the infection is over so the body doesn't waste energy or hurt itself. But what is produced by the B cells? You've heard of them, of course, antibodies. Little proteins that are engineered to bind to the surface of the specific intruder. There are even different kinds of antibodies that have slightly different jobs. The helper T cells tell the plasma cells which type is needed the most in this particular invasion. Millions of them flood the blood and saturate the body. Meanwhile, at the site of infection, the situation is getting dire. The intruders have multiplied in number and start hurting the body. Guard and attack cells fight hard, but also die in the process. Helper T cells support them by ordering them to be more aggressive and to stay alive longer. But without help, they can't overwhelm the bacteria. But now the second line of defense arrives. billions of antibodies flood the battlefield and disable lots of the intruders, rendering them helpless or killing them in the process. They also stun the bacteria and make them an easy target. Their back is built to connect to killer cells, so they can connect and kill the enemy more easily. Macrophages are especially good at gnoming up the bacteria which antibodies have attached to. Now, the balance shifts. In a team effort, the infection is wiped out. At this point, millions of body cells have already died. No big deal, the losses are quickly replenished. Most immune cells are now useless, and without the constant signals, they commit suicide, so as not to waste any resources. But some stay behind, the memory cells. If this enemy is encountered ever again in the future, they will be ready for it and probably kill it before you even notice. This was a very simplified explanation of parts of the immune system at work. Can you imagine how complex this system is? Even at this level, when we ignore so many players and all the chemistry. Life is awfully complicated, but if we take the time to understand it, we always encounter endless wonders and great beauty. This bird has magical powers. Let's see a demonstration. Bring in the latest scientific research. Wow, that's a lot of complicated stuff about the immune system and all its cells. How could someone possibly understand all of this? Incredible! This overview is delightful and easy to grasp, but still scientifically accurate. Let's make it a bit more difficult. Can she make all of evolution visible at a glance? This is brilliant. You can clearly see the relationships between species and how they evolved. And look at those illustrations. These posters are ready to be shared with the world. These very special pieces of Kurzgesagt are now available on our shop along with many other sciencey products, all researched with care and created with love by the burbs with magical powers. What makes Ebola so dangerous? How can a virus overwhelm the very complex defense system of the body so quickly and so effectively? Let's take a look at what Ebola does. Ebola is a virus. A virus is a very small thing. A bit of RNA or DNA and a few proteins in a hull. It has no ability to do anything by itself whatsoever and can only survive and proliferate by infecting cells. To avoid this, we have the immune system. The immune system is super complex, so we developed a visual system that makes it easy to understand. So it looks like this. Let's concentrate on the part that's critical to understanding Ebola and ignore the rest. So, usually, dendritic cells would activate an army of antivirus cells, support cells and antibody factories that would, together with the guard cells, wipe out the infection in a matter of days. But when Ebola strikes, it directly attacks the immune system. Some of the first cells it takes over are the dendritic cells, the brains of the immune system. The Ebola virus enters a dendritic cell by binding onto receptors for cell transport. Once it's inside, it dissolves its outer hull and releases its genetic material, nuclear proteins, and enzymes. In a nutshell, it takes over the cell, disables the cell's protective mechanisms, and reprograms it. The cell now becomes a virus production machine and uses its resources to build Ebola viruses. Once the cell is saturated, it dissolves the cell membrane and millions of viruses are released into the tissue. The virus not only prevents the dendritic cell from activating the specialized antivirus forces, it manipulates it into sending signal proteins that trick the specialized cells into ending their own lives prematurely. So the immune system is seriously disrupted and unable to react, while the virus rapidly multiplies. We're talking billions. There are cells that should deal with infected cells, the natural killer cells. But they also get infected and just die before they can prevent the disease from spreading. At the same time, Ebola infects the guard cells of the body, macrophages and monocytes. Not only managing to circumvent their defenses, it also manipulates them to signal to the cells that make up the blood vessels, telling them to release fluids into the body. Usually this makes sense, but in this case, it just causes mayhem. All over the body, neutrophils are activated, awoken by the virus and the macrophages' signals. They're not very effective against viruses and should not be involved in this fight and begin to do lots of stuff they shouldn't do. The neutrophils signal the blood vessels to release more fluid, causing internal bleeding. Another area of the body Ebola attacks is the liver. The virus finds it very easy to enter the liver, and it quickly starts killing loads of liver cells and causing organ failure and more internal bleeding. And all of those things are going on at the same time. As the virus spreads, it's like nukes exploding everywhere. One incident of this in one region would be problem enough, but now it's starting to happen everywhere at once. All the mechanisms the immune system has evolved to handle infections work against you, and the virus continues to spread and finally begins to infect more and more body cells while the body desperately struggles to stay alive. In a desperate last effort to turn the tide, the immune system launches a cytokine storm. A cytokine storm is an SOS signal that causes the immune system to launch all of its weapons all at once in a desperate kamikaze attack. This hurts the virus but leaves behind tons of collateral damage, especially in the blood vessels. Paradoxically, the healthier the immune system, the more damage it can do to itself. More and more fluid leaves the bloodstream. Blood pours out of every opening of the body. You become seriously dehydrated. There's just not enough blood left to supply the organs with oxygen, and cells begin to die. If you reach this point, the chance of you dying is very high. Currently, 6 out of 10 infected die from Ebola. Wow. Okay, Ebola is nasty. So it's time to panic, right? No, not even close. The severity of Ebola gets papers sold and YouTube videos shared, so everybody is talking about Ebola. But currently, the only way to get infected by Ebola is to come into contact with the bodily fluids of a person who shows symptoms or from an infected bat. So, just don't do that. Ebola has killed 5,000 people since June 2014. The common flu kills up to 500,000 people each year. Malaria kills up to 1 million each year, 3,000 people every single day, 10 children since this video started. So, even if Ebola is terrible and scary, don't let yourself be scared. The most infectious thing about Ebola is the media hype around it. You could learn a bit more about the immune system though. South Korea is over. This sounds brutal, but South Korea will soon start melting on all fronts. Demographically, economically, socially, culturally, and militarily. Because for decades, the country has been experiencing a fertility crisis unprecedented in human history. And we've probably reached a point of no return. By 2060, the South Korea we know and love today will no longer exist. What will the collapse look like? And why is it now almost impossible to stop? The real population bomb. To have a stable population, you need a fertility rate of about 2.1 children per woman. In the 1950s, South Koreans used to have 6 children on average. In the 1980s, the rate fell below 2. And in 2023, it was 0.72 kids per woman, the lowest ever recorded in history. In Seoul, fertility is even lower, around 0.55. On average, about half of the women here won't have any kids, and the other half just one. What do these numbers actually mean in the real world? If fertility stays as it is, then 100 South Koreans will have 36 kids. When they grow up, they will have 13 kids, who will then have 5. Within 4 generations, 100 South Koreans will turn into 5. If we look at today's South Korean population pyramid, we see this is pretty real. There's only one 1-year-old for 4 50-year-olds. After 4 decades below the replacement level, the consequences were still largely invisible. Today, South Korea's population is at an all-time high, as are its workforce and its GDP, which is still growing. But demographics hits you like a freight train. You hear it vaguely in the distance, and then it runs you over. South Korea is about to be hit. Let's time travel 35 years into the future to 2060 and see what the country will look like then. When it comes to demographics, the most commonly used projections are those put together by the UN. They envisage 3 scenarios: low fertility, medium, and high. But in the past, all medium UN projections for South Korea have consistently been too positive. Between 2022 and 2023 alone, fertility in South Korea dropped by another 8%. So we're going to use the latest low fertility scenario, which has been the most accurate in the last few years. Keep in mind that we're still talking about projections, and the future is a faraway land. Okay, let's do it. In 2060, South Korea's population pyramid will look like this. The population will have shrunk by 30%. 16 million South Koreans will have disappeared in just 35 years. And it'll be the oldest country in human history. 1 in 2 South Koreans will be over the age of 65. Less than 1 in 10 will be under 25. And only 1 in 100 will be small children. Imagine waking up in a country where the streets are strangely quiet with no children playing on them. Entire cities have been abandoned. Half of the population is elderly and living either alone or in overcrowded retirement homes, with a minority of people desperately trying to keep society running. There will be a few major consequences. Economic collapse. In 2023, a breathtaking 40% of South Koreans over 65 lived below the poverty line, but in 2060, this number may seem lovely in comparison. Today, South Korea has one of the largest pension funds in the world, worth about 730 billion US dollars. But it's projected to stop growing in the 2040s and be completely depleted by the 2050s. So in 2060, pensions will have to be paid by the working population. Estimates vary, but for a pension system to work, the minimum a society needs is between 2 to 3 workers per retiree paying for them with their taxes. But even if we assume that all South Koreans over 15 will be working in 2060, the country will have less than 1 worker per senior. Workers will be unable to stem the incredible costs. So not only will poverty among the elderly be common, but a big chunk will be forced to work. Except they may not be able to find jobs because by 2060, the South Korean economy may have collapsed. Broadly speaking, the size of an economy is linked to the size of its workforce. To have a big economy, you need a lot of workers to produce a lot of things and a lot more people to buy them. Today, South Korea has about 37 million people of working age, generating a GDP of about 1.7 trillion US dollars. But by 2060, its workforce would have shrunk to less than half, to about 17 million. Of course, technological progress means that productivity will be higher and each individual will probably produce more than today. But even if productivity keeps growing at the same rate or more than we've seen in the last decades, South Korea's GDP could peak in the 2040s. In other words, South Korea will enter a permanent economic recession. There are more optimistic projections that see the recession begin as late as 2050, but they're based on the medium UN demographic scenario, and there are no signs that we're heading there. Another factor in the economy is science, technology, and innovation, areas in which big leaps are typically made by young adults and the middle-aged. Young people have fresh ideas that contribute to the wealth of society. Significantly fewer people working also means way less tax for the government, which will be trapped between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, having to provide for half the population that are seniors, on the other, seeing its income diminish. It will be forced to shut down or cut essential services like hospitals or social benefits. Since infrastructure only works at scale, smaller communities may be abandoned as the country contracts into its metropolitan areas. And of course, there won't be enough money to invest in the future. This is bad. But what will happen to South Korean society and culture may be worse. Societal and cultural collapse. Speculating on how societies will develop is extra hard, but there are a few pretty unavoidable trends. Today, already about 20% of Koreans live alone. Also, 20% report having no close friends or relatives. By 2060, 50% of South Koreans aged 70 will have no siblings and 30% will have no children. Young adults between 25 and 35 will only make up 5% of the population and typically have no siblings at all. This leaves the elderly with almost no close family and young adults with little family and few potential friends, especially outside of big cities. A loneliness epidemic of epic proportions is all but guaranteed. On top of that, South Korean culture will probably experience a huge decline. In 2000, there were 17.5 million South Koreans between 25 and 45, and they made up 37% of the population. This was the generation that brought us K-pop, K-drama, K-food, and many other trends that spread around the world. In 2060, there will be just 5.6 million people in that age group, and they'll only be 16% of the population. Many cultural traditions are already struggling because the older generations are having trouble finding young people to pass them on to. As young people disappear, many traditions will die out. Without young people, the soul of South Korean culture will shrink and wither away. And on a personal level, what kind of experience will it be growing up in 2060? What will youth culture be like in a country of seniors, where many universities, schools and kindergartens are abandoned as there are no longer children to fill them with life? What kind of job prospects will they face, and what will politics look like? If young people don't want to remain alone, they'll concentrate in Seoul or a few other big cities, or worse for South Korea, emigrate to other countries. Rural areas will decline, and most smaller cities will turn into ghost towns. We're already seeing this in Japan, which has almost 10 million abandoned houses in rural areas. Large parts of South Korea will simply vanish and be reclaimed by nature. Last but not least, South and North Korea are technically at war, and they could very well still be in 2060. Will South Korea still be able to afford to have its young men do 18 months of mandatory military service? Today, 5% of men of combat age are enrolled in the military. In 2060, it would have to be 15% just to match today's numbers. Okay, wait, this is all a bit much. Is there no way back? Why, there really is no way back. The problem with the demographic freight train is that once it hits, things become irreversible. Let's say fertility in South Korea magically triples to the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman and stays there. In 2060, it will be an inverted pyramid on top of a barrel. And there would still be only 1.5 people of working age per senior over 65. Even in the best made-up scenario, South Korea has to pass through an unavoidable bottleneck before it will recover. But there is also a kernel of hope here. Yes, the situation is grim, but at least in the long term, recovery is possible if South Korea enacts rapid and societal changes that make its population want to have kids again. In 2024, births rose for the first time in 9 years, 3% more than in 2023. But for that to continue, South Korea needs to face the music and ask how they got to this point. How could it get that bad? In general, as societies get richer, more educated and child mortality plummets, people decide to have fewer kids. What makes South Korea special is that it's somehow supercharging all of these trends. South Korea lifted itself out of poverty in record time, but in doing so it developed a unique kind of workaholism and extreme competitiveness. Although the work week is 40 hours and the legal maximum is 52 per week, unpaid overtime is normal for many, and the government even proposed to raise legal work time to 69 hours per week. Despite this, South Korea has relatively low wages and a high cost of living. Real estate in big cities is out of reach for most people. The cost of education is extremely high, since families have to pay for private lessons if they want to send their kids to a high-tier college. All of this while South Korea spends less on family benefits than most other rich countries. Old-fashioned cultural norms make matters even worse. Marriage is all but mandatory if a couple wants to start a family. In 2023, only 4.7% of babies were born to unmarried women. Out of all developed countries, South Korean men do just about the least share of housework and childcare within their families. This leaves women with a disproportionate amount of work if they want to keep their jobs after a pregnancy, while many men are overwhelmed by the societal expectation to be the main breadwinner and have successful careers. Starting a family or not is a personal decision, and most South Koreans are deciding against it. The bottom line is that South Korea has created a culture that leads to very few kids. Conclusion. Demographic collapse is not an abstract thing in the future, it's happening right now. And it's not just South Korea. In 2023, China had a fertility rate of 1, Italy and Spain 1.2, Germany 1.4, the UK 1.6, and the US 1.6. Which sounds so much better, doesn't it? Well, after 4 generations, a fertility rate of 1.6 means 60% fewer new people. A fertility rate of 1.2 means 87% fewer people. And fertility rates are still falling with no sign of stabilization or recovery. The weirdest thing about all of this is that almost nobody involved in the public discourse has truly grasped the gravity of the situation. The last century was utterly dominated by overpopulation narratives, and people who say that we need more kids seem weird. And if you do the maths, the future just seems to be too insane to be true, like it's hard to believe. None of this has ever happened before. So, low birth rates are mostly discussed in the context of worker shortages, not as the existential threat to our societies, cultures, wealth, and our way of life that they are. If we don't take it seriously very soon and change the DNA of our modern societies in a way that encourages young people to start having children again, then the rest of the century will be pretty grim for those of us who will live through it. The demographic freight train stops for nobody. We finally need to realize that it's hurtling down the tracks right at us. In the 1960s, the US planned to nuke Israel with hundreds of thermonuclear bombs, and Panama, and Alaska, all in the name of progress driven by a mad scientist to use the most destructive of weapons to build things, excavate canals, carve out harbors, tap oil and gas. This was Project Plowshare. It kept the US busy for 2 decades, burned hundreds of millions of dollars, and exploded dozens of nukes for a bright future. In the most feverish years of the Cold War, when the world got terrifyingly close to blowing itself up. Nukes for peace. Our story begins with the brilliant Hungarian physicist Edward Teller, one of the key scientists of the Manhattan Project, the colossal effort that led to the first nuclear bomb. But almost from the beginning, he dreamt of destroying the world much harder. Traditional nukes, like the Hiroshima and Nagasaki ones, release energy by splitting heavy atoms like uranium. But these are rare, expensive, and the resulting bombs are difficult to scale up. So, Teller lobbied for a different approach: unleash the nuclear fire by smashing together hydrogen atoms. That would allow for bombs thousands of times more powerful. The problem was technically hard, but in the 1950s, Teller solved it. The terrifying new thermonuclear bomb made Hiroshima and Nagasaki look like firecrackers. Nuclear fire strong enough to end human civilization itself. The Soviet Union followed quickly, and a new madness for destruction took over the world. Teller was having the time of his life as he got to chase his nucleus dreams like a bomb so powerful that it would wipe out civilization in one single strike, a real thing the US actually started working on. We've told this story before if you want to watch it. And as the perfectly sane man he was, Teller had other great ideas, like nuking the moon to show the commies who's boss. And if H-bombs could destroy the planet, maybe they could also reshape it. The logic wasn't entirely unhinged. Humans had been using explosives for mining and engineering for centuries, and H-bombs offered the same service with much more enthusiasm at a decent cost. Why not use them to dig ditches and make holes at a planetary scale? The idea of nukes for peace was also pretty convenient. With public opinion increasingly opposed to the arms race and ever more terrified by World War III, nuclear engineering was a way to keep on testing nuclear weapons without saying you were testing nuclear weapons. So, in 1957, the US launched Project Plowshare, a bold plan to use nuclear explosions for peaceful engineering. And who would be put at the helm? Exactly. Cutting through continents. In 1956, Egypt had just nationalized the Suez Canal, a vital artery for global trade and oil delivery to Europe. So, one of the first ideas of the new Build with Nukes doctrine was to blast open a new one through the Israeli desert. On the other side of the world, the Panama Canal had long been in need of an upgrade. Scientists explored extension routes and found they would need to remove 1.2 billion cubic meters of earth, 500 Great Pyramids of Giza. A monumental task that would cost $6 billion if done with shovels, but only $3.1 billion with nukes. Time to blast open a panatomic canal. But even Teller understood that before nuking through continents, you should start small. So the first miracle of Project Plowshare would be a new harbor in Alaska. In just a few glorious milliseconds, 5 nukes with the combined punch of 170 Hiroshima bombs would carve out a 500 by 200 meter trench, opening the region to commerce and prosperity. The local communities weren't thrilled at the idea, but Teller insisted that the dangers of nuke engineering had been greatly exaggerated. The major concern was radioactive contamination. Canals and harbors were great, but nobody wanted them glowing with radioactivity for thousands of years. Luckily, Teller had a plan: nuking the land from below. In a nutshell, nuclear excavation works like this. You drill a hole a few hundred meters deep and place the bomb at the bottom. When it goes off, the blast hollows out a cavern in the rock and flash melts its walls into magma. The molten rock pools at the bottom, the ceiling collapses, and the collapse ripples upwards until it reaches the floor, where it forms a crater. The result is a massive hole on top, with the radioactive debris sealed under hundreds of thousands of tons of rock. With the theory looking flawless on paper, the time had come to actually test it. But before the government bombs anything, let's get some propaganda protection, just in case. Our partner Ground News is a website and app built to help you think critically about the information you consume, a mission we fully support. They curate news articles from across the globe, adding context on political bias, reliability, ownership, and summaries that highlight what each side is leaving out. You can even compare headlines to see how bias shapes the narrative. Take this story about Finland planning to lift its ban on nuclear weapons. Some frame it as a prudent response to the state of the world, while others warn of escalation. Ground News also reveals blind spots, stories that only one side is covering, showing you what your usual news feed is hiding. As information bubbles are becoming the norm, thinking critically about the news is no longer optional, and Ground News makes it easier to do just that. If you'd like to give them a try, go to ground.news/nutshell or scan the QR code on the screen. Using this link gives you 40% off an unlimited access subscription and directly supports our channel. And now, back to nuking for peace. The fiasco begins. Plowshare debuted in 1961 in the desert of New Mexico. A nuke with the power of 3,100 tons of TNT was buried 360 meters deep in the heart of a salt deposit. The goal was to explore a new idea to generate electricity. The explosion would melt the deposit into a pond of red-hot liquid salt whose heat could be pumped up to power turbines. A hybrid of fusion and geothermal power brought to you by H-bombs. Above ground, hundreds of officials, scientists and international guests had gathered to witness the birth of a new era. Everyone held their breath as the countdown ticked. And then, with a distant thud, the ground shuddered. Deep below, the explosion hollowed a cavern the size of over 10 Olympic swimming pools. But Teller's team had missed a tiny detail. The salt contained far more water than expected, which turned into superheated steam that massively amplified the blast. The hole used to lower the bomb had been designed to collapse and seal itself after the explosion, but the unexpectedly monstrous pressure broke through. So, a few minutes after the blast, a plume of radioactive steam erupted from the shaft, damaging cameras and instruments and bathing everyone in a strangely itchy sauna. The US government tried their best to convince everyone that things hadn't been that bad, but for some reason, the masses had a problem with clouds of radioactive fallout, even from peaceful nukes. But that wouldn't discourage Teller. So, to show the world how cool H-bombs could really be, he scheduled another test, one 30 times more peaceful. In July 1962, while Cuban officials were visiting Moscow to negotiate a missile deal that would almost spark World War III 3 months later, a thermonuclear bomb worth 7 Hiroshima nukes exploded 200 meters underground in the Nevada desert. This time, the goal was to test nuclear excavation itself and check how big the crater could get. The blast displaced 12 million tons of soil and hollowed out a gargantuan crater 100 meters deep and 400 meters across, the largest artificial crater in US history. But digging with nukes is tricky. Bury the bomb too deep and you'll only get a disappointing dent. Bury it too shallow and you risk launching a radioactive cloud into the sky. Which was exactly what happened. Someone had miscalculated the depth of the explosion and a plume of radioactivity punched through. Fallout was detected as far as South Dakota and Illinois, and panic broke out in Utah when radioactive iodine was found in milk. It turned into one of the dirtiest tests on US soil ever. Just one more nuke, bro. The years that followed saw more peaceful explosions and peaceful fallout. Meanwhile, Teller's proposals got weirder. Liquefied tar sands in Canada with nukes. Blast a highway through the Sierra Nevada with nukes. Connect rivers in Mississippi with nukes. But the crown jewel of nuclear dreams was still the Panatomic Canal. A legion of scientists worked on it and plans got disturbingly far. One of the top contenders was Route 17, an 80-kilometer trench across pristine Panamanian jungle that was short, flat, pretty empty, and perfectly nukeable. 250 bombs with the power of 8,000 Hiroshimas would do the job. 43,000 people across 17,000 square kilometers would still have to be evacuated, just in case. And shockwaves might shatter windows as far as Costa Rica and Colombia. But what were such details in the grand scheme of progress? So let's rewind history and press the button to see what might have happened if Teller had got his way. Ready to push the button? 3, 2, 1. Boom! The first round of nuclear salvos close to both coasts obliterates hundreds of square kilometers of pristine rainforest in seconds. A roaring success. Unfortunately, a cloud of fallout catches the Pacific winds. Weeks later, spikes of radiation are found over the Caribbean, and radioactive iodine, cesium and strontium start to enter the food chains of both oceans. Tuna and sharks become radioactive. One option would be to stop, but to have a radioactive scar across the jungle, contamination of 2 oceans, and no canal, better push through. So a second round of blasts goes off in the central Chuckanaki River Valley, only to find that the central part of the isthmus had far more clay than expected. As soon as the rainy season hits, landslides clog the new craters like a self-healing wound. The choices: leave a mud-choked glowing blister through the rainforest, or begin a colossal engineering nightmare just to keep the jungle from landsliding onto the canal. Not to mention the ecological apocalypse and the devastating PR victory that 120 megatons of nuclear peace over Latin America would give Cuba and the USSR. Luckily, in our timeline, the US blinked and began to sober up. In 1970, a final report killed the Panatomic Canal, and with it, all nuclear excavation projects. But Teller wasn't ready to let go, so he turned to nuclear fracking. Not because it made sense, but to keep Plowshare alive. Just one more nuke, and I'll build the future, bro. But several explosions later, the result was ultra-expensive, radioactive gas impossible to sell. In 1977, after 20 years and dozens of nukes across the US, Project Plowshare was finally cancelled without reaching any of its goals. No canal, harbour or tunnel had been built. In hindsight, it's easy to see how insane the idea was. But at a time when World War III felt imminent, when kids were playing with atomic toys as mushroom clouds filled the sky, using nukes to build a better future probably did feel like a great idea. Never before in history have there been so many people on Earth as right now. Our numbers have skyrocketed from 1 billion in 1800 to 2.3 billion in 1940, 3.7 billion in 1970, and 7.4 billion in 2016. The world population increased fourfold in the last century, so what can we expect for the next century? And what does population growth mean for our future? Will there be mass migration, overcrowded slums in megacities covering continents, diseases and pollution, chaos and violence over energy, water and food, and a human species focused only on sustaining itself? Will population growth destroy our way of life, or is this prophecy just ungrounded panic? In the 1960s, population growth reached an unprecedented rate, which led to apocalyptic prophecies. The poor would procreate endlessly and overrun the developed world. The legend of overpopulation was born. But it turns out high birth rates and the population explosion are not permanent features of some cultures or countries, but rather part of a four-step process the whole world is going through: the demographic transition. Most developed countries have already made the transition, while other countries are doing it right now. Let's go back to the 18th century, when the entire world, including Europe, was in the first stage of the demographic transition. By today's standards, Europe was worse off than a developing region, suffering from poor sanitation, poor diets, and poor medicine. A lot of people were born, but lots of them died just as fast, so the population hardly grew. Women had between 4 and 6 children, but only 2 of them would reach adulthood. Then the Industrial Revolution happened in the UK and brought the greatest change in human living conditions since the Agricultural Revolution. People went from being peasants to workers. Manufactured goods were mass-produced and became widely available. The sciences flourished and advanced transportation, communication and medicine. The role of women in society shifted and created the conditions for their emancipation. Slowly, this economic progress not only formed a middle class, but also raised standards of living and healthcare for the poor working population. The second transition stage started. Better food supplies, hygiene and medicine meant people stopped dying all the time, especially so at a very young age. The result was a population explosion, doubling the UK's population between 1750 and 1850. The main reason families used to have lots of children was that only a few of them were likely to survive. Now that had changed, so the third stage of the transition was set in motion, fewer babies were conceived, and population growth slowed down. Eventually, a balance emerged. Fewer people were dying and fewer children were born, so the death rate and birth rate became stable. Britain had reached the fourth stage of the demographic transition. This didn't only happen in the UK. More and more countries went through the four stages. First, many births and many deaths due to bad living conditions. Second, better living conditions leading to fewer deaths and a population explosion. Third, fewer deaths resulting in fewer births and population growth came to an end. But if birth rates have dropped so much, why is the population still growing so fast? Well, the children born in the population explosion of the 70s and 80s are having kids themselves now, leading to a noticeable spike in overall population. But they are having far fewer children on average than their parents. The average today is 2.5, it was 5 40 years ago. So as this generation gets older and fertility declines further, the rate of population growth will keep on slowing. This is true for every country. In the West, we tend to overlook progress in other regions of the world, but actually most of the world's countries have made it to the fourth stage. Just look at Bangladesh. In 1971, the average woman had 7 kids, but 25% of them would die before the age of 5. In 2015, the mortality rate was down to 3.8% and women had only 2.2 kids on average. This is the rule, not an exception. We're not special, we just had a head start. It took developed countries about 80 years to reduce fertility from more than 6 children to less than 3. Others are catching up fast. Malaysia and South Africa did it in only 34 years. Bangladesh took just 20. Iran managed it in 10 years. All these countries that are catching up didn't have to start from scratch, and the more support they get, the faster they catch up. This is why programs that help lower child mortality or help poor nations develop are so important. No matter what your motivation is, whether you dream of a world where all people live in freedom and wealth, or you just want fewer refugees coming to your country, the simple truth is that it's beneficial to you personally if people on the other side of the globe can live a good life. And we are getting there. The percentage of people living in extreme poverty has never been as low as today. So the future of global population growth is actually not an apocalyptic prophecy at all. It's a promise. Population growth will come to an end. The UN forecasts that the 12th billionth human will never be born at all. And as the development level of the world rises, the number of people with a higher education will increase tenfold. Countries who used to be in need will help advance development instead. More people is going to mean more people able to advance our species. Violence and war. The insane brutality of ISIS continues. The Russians are invading Ukraine, and the Palestinians and Israelis continue to slug it out. Does that make you feel gloomy? Well, don't, because if you look at the numbers, war actually seems to be going out of fashion, while the global population is at an all-time high. It seems that we live in the most peaceful period in human history. How is this possible? As of September 2014, there were 4 conflicts going on in the world that had caused at least 10,000 people to die since January 2013, 9 conflicts that killed more than 1,000 people, and 13 that killed more than 100 since January 2013. Not really peaceful, but consider this. Of all the conflicts going on, none is an active war between countries. They are either civil wars or local conflicts. Although civil wars are terrible and cause huge suffering, their impact is usually way smaller than a war between nations or empires. When 2 nations engage in war, they can mobilize much bigger forces, have access to all of the state's resources and logistics, and almost to all of the population. So why have we transitioned from wars between nation-states to civil wars? A lot of it is to do with colonialism and the Cold War. When the Cold War ended, a major driver of armed conflict vanished too. But the breakup of the communist dictatorships revealed new or old tensions, and brought new conflicts in the now freed states, which often resulted in civil war. Much more importantly, in 1945, nearly all of Africa, much of Asia, and parts of Latin America were under colonial rule. By 1990, all but a few islands were independent. But wait, couldn't you argue that what today's multinational corporations are doing in the Third World is just as bad as colonialism? Let's look at Congo. It was established as a colony in 1885 by the Belgian king, an area 80 times the size of Belgium. Violence committed against the indigenous Congolese and the ruthless system of economic exploitation had killed about half of the population by 1908. About 10 million Congolese were executed or starved to death. Millions were mutilated and traumatized. The economic exploitation of the Congo remained the top priority, and forced labor never really ceased completely until the end of Belgian rule in 1960, which is not really that long ago. So no, colonialism was much worse than vulture capitalism is today, and it ended just 2 generations ago. Most of the conflicts that are going on right now are in areas that 60 years ago were under foreign control. But things are getting better. Until 1989, victory for one side in a civil war was common, while nowadays victories are much rarer. At the same time, negotiated endings have jumped from 10% to almost 40%. What about the rest of the world? Why have nation-states stopped attacking each other? There are 4 major reasons. 1. Democratization. The steady development from autocracy to democracy. Democracies hardly ever fight each other. Of all the state-against-state wars fought since 1900, only a minority were fought between democracies. 2. Globalization. War is just not as effective at achieving economic goals as it used to be. Today, it's almost always cheaper to buy resources on the global market than to seize them by force. People from other nations are more valuable to us alive than dead, which overall is a pretty new concept. 3. War is so 20th century. Until World War I, warfare was seen as an inevitable part of the human experience and as a valuable tool which you could use to achieve goals when diplomacy hit a brick wall. Today we have rules that declare acts of aggression illegal and stipulate that armed force is only justified in self-defense or with the authority of the UN Security Council. These rules are still broken, but today it's harder to do so without sparking opposition and disapproval. Also, we have an international court for war crimes in The Hague, and that's a very recent innovation. 4. Borders are mostly fixed now. After World War II, territorial wars generally stopped when most countries pledged to accept international borders and respect other nations' autonomy. But is all of this just an anomaly, or are we on the road to lasting peace? Truth is, we don't know yet. We need a big enough sample to rule out the historical average, which is about 1 or 2 big wars per century. We just haven't had enough time since World War II to rule out the possibility that war is not going away. If we don't have one major war in the next 75 years, we can be really confident that humanity is changing. So, you see, war might be over. Yes, there are nasty conflicts going on in many places, but overall, things are getting better, and we can make them even better by speaking up for peace and democracy. A war has been going on for billions of years that breeds well-armed monsters who struggle with other monsters for survival. Having no particular interest in us, most of them are relatively harmless, as our immune systems deal with their weapons easily. But there are exceptions. Naegleria fowleri is an amoeba that has not only developed a deadly taste for human brains, but is also a match for our defenses and stars in dramatic headlines. What happens when this monster enters your body? Naegleria fowleri is an amoeba, a microbe with a nucleus, one of the smallest life forms on Earth. It is a voracious hunter of bacteria and other critters that it devours whole and rips into pieces. Like many amoebae, it is able to transform into different stages that help it survive. But most of the time, Naegleria fowleri is in its trophozoite stage, during which it looks like a squishy blob with tiny arms, and hunts, divides, and thrives. Its natural home is in fresh water, ponds, rivers, lakes, and hot springs. But, unfortunately, it also feels happy in pipes, swimming pools, fountains or spas when they're not properly treated. The warmer the water, the more it thrives and multiplies. So in the summer, when humans seek to cool off and enjoy themselves, the chances are highest that both species will interact. Because this makes it hard to avoid, millions of people regularly have contact with the amoeba, especially in warmer climates, and many people even seem to have antibodies against it. And this is mostly okay. You can even swallow it without consequences. Things turn bad when people dive or swim in water contaminated with the amoeba and water splashes high up into their noses. In a single drop of lake water, there are millions of viruses, bacteria and amoebae, and that isn't really a big deal. But Naegleria fowleri is different. Let's zoom into the nose of an unsuspecting victim enjoying a great summer day and see what happens. First of all, the amoeba doesn't really want to be inside your nose, as it's not really looking for trouble. It just wants to eat a few bacteria. Instead, it's greeted by your natural defenses. Unfortunately for humans, Naegleria fowleri happens to be exceptionally good at generally flying under the radar of your immune system. For example, the inside of your nose is covered by mucosa, a slime filled with chemicals that kill or stun possible invaders or alert immune cells. But Naegleria fowleri is not particularly bothered by them and instead calmly checks out the scenery, mildly annoyed about the whole ordeal. Now, if you are unlucky, the tiny critter stumbles over something that actually sparks its interest: nerve cells. Your nose is filled with a large network of olfactory nerve cells that pick up molecules from the outside and transmit their information to your olfactory bulb, the center of smell in your brain. To do their job, these cells talk to each other by releasing various messenger chemicals and recognizing them via specific receptors. One of the most important of these chemicals is acetylcholine. Through sheer evolutionary bad luck, Naegleria fowleri happens to have receptors that recognize acetylcholine, and it seems to attract them irresistibly, a little like moths that are attracted by light. So as your olfactory nerve cells do their job, using plenty of acetylcholine to talk to the brain, Naegleria fowleri enters your tissue. It seems to follow the chemical signals upstream. Neutrophils, crazy suicide warriors, begin to attack the amoebae. Individually, they have no chance against them, as the invaders are large and pretty buff fighters, used to dealing with tough enemies. So the defenders swarm the intruders and kill them either by vomiting chemicals that punch holes into them or by literally ripping parts of them off and devouring them. But the Naegleria fowleri train is still on track, and while the neutrophil attacks slow them down, they continue to follow the olfactory nerves to their final destination, your brain. This process can take between 1 and 9 days, and you'll probably not notice anything during that time, until the amoebae reach the olfactory bulb, the center of smell and entrance to your brain. Your brain cells are nothing more than helpless victims, and they all release that wonderful acetylcholine. Naegleria fowleri initiates a massacre and releases an onslaught of various attack molecules. Some of them are basically little bombs that rip holes into your cells on contact so their pieces can be eagerly consumed. But Naegleria fowleri is now multiplying, and it's also becoming really creepy. In a feeding frenzy, it can develop up to a dozen suckers called food cups that look like giant, eerie mouths. The amoebae engage your brain cells, suck them in, and rip large bites out of them while they're still alive. Now things escalate quickly, and the disease that will kill you sets in. Alerted by the massacre, millions of immune cells, neutrophils, eosinophils and microglias invade the infected tissue. Which is a problem. Your immune system is dangerous and not exactly a careful fighter. It's like burning down a forest to kill the wolves inside it. A really bad idea in the brain. They waste no time and attack the amoeba, using all the weapons available to them, from chemicals to trying to eat them alive. Neutrophils explode themselves to erect barriers spiked with deadly chemicals. A fierce battle ensues. Naegleria fowleri can actually fight back, itself attacking and killing many immune cells. The immune system now throws everything it has at the invader, but in vain. The complement system, tiny protein bombs that can kill intruders on their own, are easily disabled. Antibodies, usually one of your superweapons, are just destroyed or swallowed. A high fever that usually slows enemies down does nothing, as the amoeba actually thrives in the heat. All the while, the amoebae continue to multiply, fight, and devour your brain cells. A disastrous chain reaction is taking place. One major thing your immune cells do when they fight is to cause inflammation, which directs large amounts of fluid from your bloodstream into the site of an infection. So, as the battle rages on without a clear winner, more and more fluid enters the brain. At this point, the human will feel symptoms that quickly escalate. It all begins pretty vaguely: a headache, fever, nausea, and vomiting. As the battle spreads rapidly through the brain, serious symptoms appear, from confusion, inability to concentrate, to fatigue, seizures, and hallucinations. The brain swells up massively but can't expand due to the bones surrounding it. So it compresses and disables the brainstem that controls things like breathing. Usually within a week, the patient dies. Up to 97% of the patients infected by the amoeba share this fate. In almost all cases, by the time an infection by Naegleria fowleri is recognized, the disastrous battle for the brain is already so far along that there is almost nothing to be done. Not only do we currently not have effective treatments, there are also an abundance of open questions about how an amoeba that usually enjoys its life in open water is able to overcome our immune system so effectively. So, how worried do you need to be about this horrifying killer amoeba? Well, not very. While the Naegleria fowleri is clearly extremely deadly, and the infection truly horrible, there have only been a few hundred cases in the last few decades. You are way more likely to drown in a pool than to get infected. Not only does the amoeba need to be flushed high up your nose, it also needs to get a good grip, and it also has to make its way through the first lines of your defenses. Ultimately, Naegleria fowleri is neither evil nor a huge public health risk. But every year, some unlucky people have to deal with it. We still have so much to learn about it, and until we find a way to treat it, Naegleria fowleri will continue to be this vague and horrifying thing, hunting in puddles and lakes, and sometimes pools. Usually for bacteria, and very occasionally for people. Oh, hey. Who are you?
It's me, your existential dread.
Okay.
I'm here to make you question your own existence and everything you hold dear in life.
Could you not, please?
Too late. Just look at all these amazing posters full of humbling visualizations, like the scale of the universe. Look how huge it is and how small you are. Look at the Education Edition, how it dives deep into the history of evolution or all the other scientific fields to make you feel bad for all the stuff you don't know. Or look at this one. It glows in the dark.
But Dread, these do make me feel good, actually. They do fill me with excitement and awe about how amazing our universe is. And I love learning. And look how pretty they are.
No! I can't persist in the presence of awe!
What would you say if we told you that humanity is currently making a collaborative effort to engineer the perfect superbug? A bug that could kill hundreds of millions of people. Well, it is happening right now. We are in the process of creating a superbacterium. Bacteria are among the oldest living things on this planet. The smallest thing we still consider life, they are masters of survival and can be found everywhere. Most bacteria are harmless to us. Your body hosts trillions of them and they help you to survive. But others can invade your body, spread quickly, and kill you. Millions of people used to die as a result of bacterial infections, until we developed a superweapon, antibiotics. Together with vaccinations, antibiotics revolutionized medicine and saved millions of lives. Antibiotics kill the vast majority of susceptible bacteria fairly quickly, leaving only a small group of survivors that our immune system then deals with easily. How do antibiotics do this? Imagine a bacterium as a very complex machine with thousands of complex processes going on that keep it alive and active. Antibiotics disrupt this complex machinery, for example by interfering with its metabolism, slowing down their growth significantly so they are less of a threat. Other antibiotics attack DNA and prevent it from being replicated, which stops bacteria from multiplying, ultimately killing them. Or by simply ripping the outer layer of the bacteria to shreds so that their insides spill out and they die quickly. All of this without bothering body cells. But now, evolution is making things more complicated. By pure random chance, a small minority of the bacteria invading your body might have evolved a way to protect themselves. For example, by intercepting the antibiotics and changing the molecule so it becomes harmless. Or by investing energy in pumps that eject the antibiotics before they can do damage. A few immune bacteria are not that big a deal because the immune system can take care of them. But if they escape, they might spread their immunity. How can bacteria spread immunity? First of all, bacteria have two kinds of DNA, the chromosome and small free-floating parts called plasmids. They can hug each other and exchange those plasmids to exchange useful abilities. This way, immunity can be spread quickly through a population. Or in a process called transformation, bacteria can harvest dead bacteria and collect DNA pieces. This even works between different bacteria species and can lead to superbugs, bacteria that are immune to multiple antibiotics. A variety of superbugs already exist in the world. Especially hospitals are the perfect breeding grounds for them. Humans have short memories. The horrors of the pre-antibiotic era have been forgotten. Today, we treat this powerful medicine as a commodity instead of as the game-changing achievement of science that it is. This has led to a strange disconnect. Hundreds of millions of people still don't have access to antibiotics in developing countries, while in other parts of the world, antibiotics are prescribed too freely and taken without care. Antibiotics should be a last resort drug, not something you take because your cold is annoying. Another serious problem is antibiotic use in meat production. At any particular point in time, humanity holds between 20 and 30 billion animals as livestock. To make meat cheaper, many animals are held in horrible conditions, in very tight spaces, and in unhygienic conditions, the perfect breeding ground for a disease. So many animals are given antibiotics to kill as many bacteria as possible and prevent them from getting sick, because a cheeseburger has to cost $1. Unsurprisingly, as a result of this system, we have created more and more bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics. To counteract this, we use different antibiotics, and we have another secret weapon. There are specific antibiotics that are used to wipe out bacteria that have developed resistance. There are strict rules for using these to avoid the creation of a superbacterium. Or so we thought. In late 2015, scary news arrived from China. Resistance against colistin, a last-ditch antibiotic, had been discovered. Colistin is an old drug and was rarely used because it can damage the liver. So there was little resistance against it, which made it a great antibiotic of last resort for certain complex infections that occur in hospitals to fight bacteria that have become immune to a whole bunch of other drugs. Bacteria resistance to colistin is very, very bad news. It might destroy a last line of defense and lead to a whole lot of dead people. How could this happen? Millions of animals in Chinese pig farms have been given colistin for years. Resistant bacteria developed, spreading first from animal to animal and then to humans without being noticed. On an average day, there are over 100,000 flights on Earth, kind of connecting every human on the planet. By creating the modern world, we have also built the infrastructure for a dangerous pandemic. Still, we don't need to panic just yet. Bacteria evolve, humans do research. New antibiotics are developed as old ones become obsolete. Technology is advancing every day. The problem is real and serious, but the fight is far from over. If humanity plays its cards right, superbugs might turn out to be not very super after all. Humans rule Earth without competition, but we're about to create something that may change that. Our last invention, the most powerful tool, weapon, or maybe even entity, artificial superintelligence. This sounds like science fiction, so let's start at the beginning. Intelligence is the ability to learn, reason, acquire knowledge and skills, and use them to solve problems. Intelligence is power, and we're the species that exploited it the most. So much so that humanity broke the game of nature and took control. But the journey there wasn't straightforward. For most animals, intelligence costs too much energy to be worth it. Still, if we track intelligence in the tree of species over time, we can see lots of diverse forms of intelligence emerge. The earliest brains were in flatworms 500 million years ago, just a tiny cluster of neurons to handle basic body functions. It took hundreds of millions of years for species to diversify and become more complex. Life conquered new environments, gained new senses, and had to contend with fierce competition over resources. But in nature, all that matters is survival, and brains are expensive, so for almost all animals, a narrow intelligence fit for a narrow range of tasks was enough. In some environments, animals like birds, octopuses, and mammals evolved more complex neural structures. For them, it paid off to have more energy-consuming skills like advanced navigation and communication. Until 7 million years ago, the hominins emerged. We don't know why, but their brains grew faster than their relatives. Something was different about their intelligence. Very slowly, it turned from narrow to general, from a screwdriver to a multi-tool, able to think about diverse problems. 2 million years ago, Homo erectus saw the world differently from anyone before, as something to be understood and transformed. They controlled fire, invented tools, and created the first culture. We probably emerged from them around 250,000 years ago with an even larger and more complex brain. It enabled us to work together in large groups and to communicate complex thoughts. We used our intelligence to improve our lives, to ask how things worked and why things are the way they are. With each discovery, we asked more questions and pushed forward, preserving what we learned, outpacing what evolution could do with genes. Knowledge builds on knowledge. Progress was slow at first and then sped up exponentially. Agriculture, writing, medicine, astronomy, or philosophy exploded into the world. 200 years ago, science took off and made us even better at learning about the world and speeding up progress. 35 years ago, the internet age began. Today, we live in a world made to suit our needs, created by us, for us. This is incredibly new. We forget how hard it was to get here, how enormous the steps on the intelligence ladder were, and how long it took to climb them. But once we did, we became the most powerful animal in the world in a heartbeat. But we may be in the process of changing this. We're building machines that could be better at the very thing that gave us the power to conquer the planet. Humanity's final invention. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is software that performs mental tasks with a computer, code that uses silicon instead of neurons to solve problems. In the beginning, AI was very simple. Lines of code on paper, mere proofs of concept to demonstrate how machines could perform mental tasks. Only in the 1960s did we start seeing the first examples of what we would recognize as AI. A chatbot in 1964, a program to sort through molecules in 1965. Slow, specialized systems requiring experts to use them. Their intelligence was extremely narrow, built for a single task inside a controlled environment. The equivalent of flatworms 500 million years ago doing the minimum amount of mental work. Progress in AI research paused several times when researchers lost hope in the technology. But just like changing environments create new niches for life, the world around AI changed. Between 1950 and 2000, computers got 1 billion times faster, while programming became easier and widespread. In 1972, AI could navigate a room. In 1989, it could read handwritten numbers. But it remained a fancy tool, no match for humans. Until in 1997, an AI shocked the world by beating the world champion in chess, proving that we could build machines that could surpass us, but we calmed ourselves because a chessbot is quite stupid. Not a flatworm, but maybe a bee, only able to perform a specialized narrow task. But within this narrow task, it's so good that no human will ever again beat AI at chess. As computers continued to improve, AI became a powerful tool for more and more tasks. In 2004, it drove a robot on Mars. In 2011, it began recommending YouTube videos to you. But this was only possible because humans broke down problems into easy-to-digest chunks that computers could solve quickly. Until we taught AIs to teach themselves. Rise of the self-learning machines. This is not a technical video, so we're massively oversimplifying here. In a nutshell, the sheer power of supercomputers was combined with the almost endless data collected in the information age to make a new generation of AI. AI experts began drastically improving forms of AI software called neural networks, enormously huge networks of artificial neurons that start out being bad at their tasks. They then used machine learning, which is an umbrella term for many different training techniques and environments that allows algorithms to write their own code and improve themselves. The scary thing is that we don't exactly know how they do it and what happens inside them, just that it works and that what comes out the other end is a new type of AI, a capable black box of code. These new AIs could master complex skills extremely quickly with much less human help. They were still narrow intelligences, but a huge step up. In 2014, Facebook AI could identify faces with 97% accuracy. In 2016, an AI beat the best humans in the incredibly complex game of Go. In 2018, a self-learning AI learned chess in 4 hours just by playing against itself, and then defeated the best specialized chess bot. Since then, machine learning has been applied to reading, image processing, solving tests, and much more. Many of these AIs are already better than humans for whatever narrow task they were trained, but they still remained a simple tool. AI still didn't seem that big of a deal for most people. And then came the chatbot ChatGPT. The work that went into it is massive. It trained on nearly everything written on the internet to learn how to handle language, which it now does better than most people. It can summarize, translate, and help with some maths problems. It's incredibly more broad than any other system just a few years ago, not crushing any single benchmark, but all of them at once. Many large tech companies are spending billions to build powerful competitors. AI is already transforming customer service, banking, healthcare, marketing, copywriting, creative spaces, and more. AI-generated content has already taken hold of social media, YouTube, and news websites. Elections are expected to be inundated by propaganda and misinformation. No one is sure how much good or harm can come from adopting AI everywhere. Change is scary. There will be winners and losers. One of the biggest questions governments and corporations have now is how to manage the transition to an AI-boosted economy. All these potential gains or risks are just the result of today's AI. ChatGPT's intelligence is a major step up, but it remains narrow. While it can write a great essay in seconds, it doesn't understand what it's writing. But what if the AIs stopped being narrow? General AI. What makes humans different from current AI is our general intelligence. Humans can technically absorb any piece of knowledge and start working on any problem. We're great at many very different skills and tasks, from playing chess to writing or solving science puzzles, not equally of course. Some of us are experts in some fields and beginners in others, but we can technically do all of them. In the past, AI was narrow and able to become good at one skill, but was rather bad in all the others. Simply by building faster computers and pouring more money into AI training, we'll get us new, more powerful generations of AI. But what if the next step for AI is to become a general intelligence like us, an AGI? If the AI improvement process continues as it has been, it's not unlikely that AGI could be better in most or even all skills that humans can do. We don't know how to build AGI, how it will work, or what it will be able to do. Since narrow AIs today are capable of mastering one mental task quickly, AGI might be able to do the same with all mental tasks. So even if it starts out stupid, an AGI might be able to become as smart and capable as a human. While this sounds like science fiction, most AI researchers think this will happen sometime this century, maybe already in a few years. Humanity is not ready for what will happen next, not socially, not economically, not morally. Earlier, we defined intelligence as the ability to learn, reason, acquire knowledge and skills, and use them to solve problems, all things humans excel at. An AGI as intelligent as even an average human would already disrupt modern civilization because they're not bound by the same limitations as we are. Today's AIs like ChatGPT already think and solve the tasks they were made for at least 10 times faster than even very skilled humans. Maybe AGI will be slower, but it may also be faster, maybe much faster. And since AGIs are software, you could copy them endlessly as long as you have enough storage and run them in parallel. There are 8 million scientists in the world. Now imagine an AGI copied 1 million times and put to work. Imagine 1 million scientists working 24/7, thinking 10 times faster than humans without being distracted, only focused on the task they've been given. What if suddenly AGI could do all intelligence-based jobs in the world, from interpreting law to coding to creating animated YouTube videos, better, faster and much cheaper than humans? Would whoever controls this AGI suddenly own the economy? And thinking bigger, human progress is our intelligence applied to problems. So what could 1 million AGIs achieve? Solve fundamental questions of science, like dark energy. Invent new technology that gives us limitless energy, fix climate change, cure aging and cancer. But then again, sadly, humans apply their intelligence not just for the benefit of all. What if the AGIs are tasked to guide drones or pull the triggers in war? Or to engineer a virus that only kills people with green eyes? Or to create the most profitable social media so addictive that people starve in front of their screens? The creation of AGI could reasonably be as big of an event as taming fire or electricity, and give whoever invents it equally as much power. But now let's go one step further. What if the potential of AGI doesn't stop here? Intelligence explosion. Intelligence and knowledge build and accelerate each other, but humans are limited by biology and evolution. Once we evolved the right hardware, our software outpaced evolution by orders of magnitudes, and within a heartbeat, we ruled this planet. But our software basically hasn't changed much since then, which is why we have obesity and destroy the climate for short-term gains. Since AGI is software on a computer, once it's smart enough to do AI research, the rate of AI progress should speed up a lot, and that results in better AI that's better at AI research without much human involvement. It may even be possible that AI could learn how to directly improve itself, in which case some experts fear this feedback loop could be incredibly fast. Maybe just months or years after the first self-improving AGI is switched on. Maybe it would actually take decades. We simply don't know. This is all speculative. But such an intelligence explosion might lead to a true super-intelligent entity. We don't know what such a being would look like, what its motives or goals would be, what would go on in its inner world. We could be as laughably stupid to a superintelligence as squirrels are to us, unable to even comprehend its way of thinking. This hypothetical scenario keeps many people up at night. Humanity is the only example we have of an animal becoming smarter than all others, and we have not been kind to what we perceive as less intelligent beings. AGI might be the last invention of humanity. It's possible that it could become the most intelligent and therefore most powerful being on Earth. A god in a box that could exercise its power to bring unimaginable wealth and happiness to humans while securing our future. Or it could subvert civilization and bring about our end, with humanity unable to come up with a way to stop it. We'll look at some of these potential futures in more videos, but for now, let's wrap up. The only thing we know for sure is that today, right now, many of the largest and richest companies in the world are racing to create ever more powerful AIs. Whatever our future is, we are running towards it. Who knows how long we have until we must confront our AI future?